Species. Unite.
In the case of lions, they're not easy neighbors. They're also not the worst neighbors. I think in most cases, it's a matter of learning how to live next to nature, next to other animals, and animals that can potentially be dangerous.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. This conversation is with GJ Collomb. GJ is the CEO of Wildlife Conservation Network. They connect global donors with community-based conservationists, and they're changing the way the world finds and funds often overlooked projects in the field and helps foster coexistence between communities and the animals who live among them. Hi, GJ. It's great to see you again.
Well, hello, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Why don't you tell us about what Wildlife Conservation Network is, and then we'll go into the details.
Our mission is to protect endangered animals by supporting conservationists who ensure that people and wildlife can coexist and thrive. And it's really hard for philanthropists to find independent, effective, field-based wildlife conservationists. It's easy to find the big, large organizations. It's hard to find all the people on the ground who are doing equally great work. And for those people on the ground who are often local nationals, who have relatively small organizations, where some of them are growing, it's also really hard for those organizations and individuals to find these philanthropists. And so many of them end up depending on kind of a grant cycle from foundations or even from scientific research grant, and kind of breaking out of that cycle is really difficult. And yet that's what they need in order to really grow the impact that they seek to have. So there's a real need to connect these conservationists to philanthropists and vice versa.
How do you vet the organizations? How does someone end up to be one of the 26?
It's a long process. So first of all, we look for organizations that are working to protect an endangered species. We're looking for organizations that are actively helping with the conservation aspect of that species, not just doing research. Research is a foundational pillar for sound conservation, but it isn't enough. We look for organizations that spend most of their budget in the range countries where they work, and that have a strong community-based or community-led conservation component. We really believe that if we want to succeed, we've got to ensure that both people and wildlife benefit from whatever activities are taking place. We are interdependent, and I think that's one important thing to realize, is that the challenges that we face are quite complex, and so the solutions aren't complex, and people are at the center of these solutions. So we've got to find something that really works for people and works for wildlife and works for those entire landscapes and all the ecosystem services that are dependent on all this. And then there's a fair amount of more or less tangibles aspect, subjective. We do a lot of due diligence to make sure that the organizations are effective, are collaborative, share our values. Obviously, the basics of being compliant and doing everything by the book in terms of their governance and accounting, et cetera, et cetera. It goes without saying, but it takes a fair amount of work still to vet all those things. And I think that's one of the
Yeah.
services that WCN provides for donors based in the United States is that we do all this due diligence. So people might be on vacation and meet somebody on a safari, and they don't really know whether that person just presents well for the 2 hours that they spend with them and they're inspired by the project, but does the project really have the kind of impact that they portray to have? And so by investing through WCN, people are able to have a sense of safety in their investment because we can do all that due diligence and then say, yes, these organizations are check all the boxes.
When you go on your website, the part where you can choose an animal, and if you want to support elephants or Bornean elephants, so you click on one of the things that really stuck out to me is just how many animals are endangered, right? And I know this, but when you see all their pictures,
Yep.
it's horrifying, and how much work is being done and needs to be done, and how much help is needed right now. And so many of these animals, and I want to talk about some of them, are literally this is the last ditch effort for a lot of species. So without organizations like the organizations you work with and your partners, some of these species don't have a chance, right?
No, that's true. I think this is what motivates us all to just not give up, to want to do more. One species that really comes to mind, or maybe I'll mention two, but pangolins are a set of species that, their biggest claim to fame is, unfortunately, that they're the most trafficked mammal in the world. All of that primarily for their scales, which are made out of keratin, the same thing that's in our fingernails, and yet they're being driven to extinction by the wildlife trade for their scales and other body parts. A lot of people have not heard about pangolins. Sometimes I say pangolins and people will say, what is that, penguins? And it's like, no, it's not penguins. So we put together a pangolin crisis fund a couple of years ago that has now grown to be the largest funding mechanisms to protect pangolins. It's supported a number of projects around the globe in all of the range countries where pangolins are found. We're seeing some progress, some victories, but the battle is going to be long. That's one that we cannot let off our foot off the gas there. There's a series of steps that need to be taken if we want to live in a world where pangolins are present and safe.
Right, because the trade's not slowing down, is it?
It is not, no.
We could go through every animal on your website and I'd be very interested. But I do want to talk about a few. One is painted dogs.
Painted dogs are an awesome animal. Unfortunately, there are probably less than 7,000-ish of them left. So it's a species that's suffered very, very severe decline due to intense hunting throughout the century. I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of seeing a painted dog, but it's a gorgeous animal. It's known by many, many different names. It's also known as an African wild dog, a painted wolf, and a painted dog. All of those animals are the same, and they're all endangered. And so it's really important to try to protect them. They're found in Africa. They are extremely social animals. They are fascinating because they really care for their young and for their sick. So when the pack makes a kill, they'll let those individuals eat first. It is not that typical throughout the animal kingdom, and I think it's something that we can learn from, is to be a little bit more compassionate towards our fellows who have less than us and who have higher needs. So painted dogs display that in spades. We've had huge success with our partner in Zimbabwe called the Painted Dog Conservation. That does this fantastic set of work to work with communities and really provide benefits to communities and tie those benefits to the conservation of painted dogs. They've been very effective at providing children's bush camps or educational opportunities for kids. Well, they take kids for a week, bring them out to their facility, give them an opportunity to be exposed to nature, really tie the environmental side of their work into their curriculum, so the kids also make progress with their academics, and the kids develop this understanding, caring, and in some cases, love for that animal. They've been doing this for so many years. They've had kids now that have started to work for the organization as rangers or in other capacity. They've had kids who've gone home and talked to their parents and said, "No, we can't be hunting this animal," or one is caught in a trap, even though the trap wasn't put out for that animal. We've got to rescue it. We've got to release it, and the kids can be a huge influence over their parents and therefore over the whole community. Unfortunately, the efforts of a painted dog conservation aren't enough to protect painted dogs throughout the continent of Africa. And there are several organizations that do similar work, but they aren't properly resourced. They don't all network with each other. And this is why we decided to launch a Painted Dog Fund in partnership with the Painted Wolf Foundation, an organization that will help run this fund. But the goal is to continue to raise awareness of that species and raise more funding so that we can provide grants to any number of organizations that are working and effectively working to reverse the decline of painted dogs throughout their range.
Painted dogs are truly one of the coolest animal I've ever seen, with their big Mickey Mouse ears and their beautiful faces. But for bigger predators like lions, you do work with a few partners that are working with lions, and a lot of working with lions includes coexistence programs. So will you talk about some of that?
In the case of lions, they're not easy neighbors. They're also not the worst neighbors. In most cases, it's a matter of learning how to live next to nature, next to other animals, and animals that can potentially be dangerous. It's learning how to adapt our livelihood styles and what we do to minimize those risks. It's learning to understand and explain the interdependencies that we have with all these species. A landscape without its top predator is probably a less healthy landscape, and it's going to be a landscape that's going to be less able to support any number of other species, and ultimately it's going to cascade down to it's going to be unable to support us and our livelihood. And so and whether that is, in direct resources, but even our mental well-being and just our connection to nature, our spirituality, all those aspects I think are dependent on a strong, vibrant landscape that requires all those different trophic levels, including its top predators. So in order to conserve lions, we absolutely have to make sure that large areas are protected. So there's a real role for protected areas where lions and a number of other species can be fully protected. But we also have to make sure that around all those areas, because most animals don't know where the boundaries of such areas are and they go in and out, we've got to make sure that we work closely with people to foster coexistence and find ways for people to work next to predators, whether that be lions or any number of other predators. And that's a big part of what the Lion Recovery Fund does, is find organizations that work to secure these large landscapes and work with communities in some of those buffer zones and find ways to coexist with lions and wildlife in general. To this date, I think we've invested in a little bit over half of the lion range throughout Africa. So our footprint is quite extensive, but there's still a fair amount to do.
I just always am fascinated by coexistence programs with really big predators like lions. Really big, terrible things can happen and have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that people are willing to try coexistence, and do it. And many different coexistence programs work. But I find like the willingness outside of the US, especially India, a lot of places in Africa, there's a different kind of willingness than we seem to have here.
I mean, there are a couple of other things also that go into play into several of the African countries where some of our partners work. Wildlife can be quite prominent. It has been a big part of some of these countries' economies through the development of tourism. Now, that has flip sides. Tourism cannot be the sole solution, but there's a fair amount of opportunities to also go and emphasize the economic value of wildlife and make sure that some of those benefits trickle down to communities, which is always a challenge. There's also, I think, a close connection still between people and nature. And I think that gets eroded in different parts at different speeds, depending on urbanization and whatnot. But we've got to lean into those natural connections and that innate sense that we have as human beings to connect with our environment.
It's essential, like if we want to keep species we have. Well, GJ, thank you for what you do. Thank you for all your partners, for all the work that happens because of you guys. Thank you very much. To learn more about JG, to learn more about the Wildlife Conservation Network, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and can do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knudsen, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polke-Link, Ciara Dolan, Bethany Jones, and Anna Colner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.